The late approval of mining quotas out of Indonesia has actually created a bit of a bottleneck from the miners' point of view, but also from the refiners of processing plants and RKF smelters in Indonesia, primarily because they're not able to get access to ore coming out of the country. So our understanding is that the Indonesian government has so far allowed access to 145 million tons of ore to be mined this year, but our estimates here at Benchmark is that at the average saprolite and laterite grades, as well as having some assumptions of moisture content and yield loss, Indonesia, or the capacity of the smelters this year, will actually require around 260 million tons of ore this year. That means that the Indonesian government is 100 million tons of ore short to meet those increasing capacities coming out of the country. Now, another thing that how this affects the RKF smelters and refineries within Indonesia is that there's a lot of vertically integrated smelters, meaning that they get access directly to this mined ore from the country, and they're not really facing any difficulties in terms of how much production they want to supply to the market this year. But for those RKF smelters that are not vertically integrated, they are facing difficulties in getting access to ore. There's a lot of competition for that ore. There's very tight volumes. And what this means is that they're gonna have to pay, or they're having to pay a higher price for these tight volumes to actually produce at the capacity that they desire. Obviously, nickel prices are relatively low this year, and with higher ore costs, essentially some of these RKF smelters and operators, they're getting very, very squeezed if the ore costs is actually increasing for them. So potentially what we could see is that some of them get squeezed out of the market because they're not producing profitably. And so yeah, we could actually potentially see some Indonesian volumes going off the market this year if that continues to be the case. At Benchmark, we're currently tracking around 10 new projects, at least 10 new projects overall coming into the nickel market this year. And virtually all of them are pretty much coming from Indonesia. No other country or region is pretty much bringing any new projects into the market this year. Out of these 10 projects, some of them are greenfield projects, some of them are brownfield projects. But overall, we expect around 150,000 tons of nickel capacity to be brought online. But out of some of the currently operating smelters and refineries in Indonesia itself, some of them obviously just came online in the past 1 to 2 years, meaning that they're still in the ramp-up phase. So we see another at least 200,000 tons of nickel coming out of this currently operating asset. So overall, more than 200,000 to 300,000 tons of nickel coming out of Indonesia. Most of the capacity coming in Indonesia for the nickel market is still destined for the stainless steel market. So a lot of the capacity and the ramp-ups that are happening in the country are in the form of NPI or ferronickel. And we need to understand that, yeah, these two products still account for at least 40 to 50% of the overall nickel market. Stainless steel accounts for 67% of the total demand. So that's why there's still quite a lot of supply that is destined for that market. But a lot of the growth that is coming out of Indonesia is actually coming from HPAL operations. We are currently tracking 4 operations in Indonesia that are producing MHP, which is destined for the battery industry. And there's currently around 20 projects that we also have in our database that are meant to come online in Indonesia, or that have announced that they want to produce MHP, which will be destined for the battery industry. Aside from this, there's also one of the structural changes that is happening in the market, where a lot of producers are integrating nickel matte converters into their NPI operations so that they have the flexibility with that laterite mine to either produce nickel metal or nickel sulfate, meaning that they can feed both the stainless steel or the battery industry, depending on how prices in each market is developing in producing period. This year, we still expect to see a market surplus in the nickel market, and but it's definitely not going to be as oversupplied as what we saw in 2023. This year, we have seen already, pretty much from early January until now, a lot of operations have gone off the market. Many of those operations have been in Australia, some of them in New Caledonia, and there's risk that many operations may still go off the market if prices remain quite low. So because of this, we expect a market surplus that is going to be a lot lower than what we saw in 2023. But even though we have seen a lot of supply go off the market, as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of new material coming from Indonesia. Overall, we do expect demand to be a little bit better than last year as well. So we are still seeing a slowdown in demand, but we still expect it to be better than last year. So seeing this supply and demand balance, we are expecting prices to still remain relatively low, around the $16,000 to $17,000 per ton average for 2024 overall. But over the short to medium term, we expect this to gradually increase again as demand becomes better, or as demand increases over the following periods, providing higher support for prices.